Hi, so I recorded a video in one of my Facebook groups earlier on inflammation, but it didn't save and it didn't upload properly, so I have to record it again here. So the topic was on inflammation and how inflammation can affect us on a health or fat loss campaign. So how inflammation may affect your results if you're, say, weighing once a week, or if you're measuring, or you're even monitoring clothes and how they fit. Now, a lot of people can see inflammation, can feel inflammation. A lot of my clients become very in tune or intuitive with their body over time, so they can feel the inflammation. Like I can for sure feel inflammation. If I'm overtrained or my brain is overworked or I haven't slept well, I will feel very warm. I'll feel swollen. My face will be very warm. Even my gums and my teeth feel inflamed, like I can feel it. If I've overtrained, my central nervous system will get shot. And what that means is my stress levels going through my CNS, my central nervous system, will be excessively high, and pretty much they're saying, Shemaine, you need to chill out, I need to rest. But if I try to hold a pen or do my makeup, I have pretty much no control over my hands, so it will shake a lot and I'll need to try and stabilize it. And the only way for me, and this is very individual, for me, I can start to repair my central nervous system is through sleep, anti-inflammatory foods, rest, and carbohydrates do my central nervous system wonders. So then I'll see an improvement in the 24 hours after that, and I'll have regained control. My temperature will have gone down, even my heart rate will have gone down. But that's very individual. There's a lot of components, there's a lot of key players and information from individual to individual to individual. So my inflammation is on more of a physical level, from the likes of overtraining and overworking. Someone else might be more emotional based inflammation that can be driven up from chronic stress all the time. And then of course someone else's might be from old injuries, someone else's might be from inflammatory foods or food intolerances or allergens or toxic exposure. So there's all different things that can play a part in inflammation. But unfortunately it is just society nowadays in that inflammation is pretty much everywhere, as is stress. So where we've got stress, a lot of the time we have inflammation, and that's just how it is. I was saying to some of my clients, in the 3 years that I have been running the HEDA guide, I have had to evolve the HEDA guide based on how I see people and society changing and evolving and growing along with stress, and I've had to adapt my programs to coincide with all those changes. So stress is, in my opinion, in the last 3 years seems to have gotten a lot worse. I don't know, is that because I have an adult with adult responsibilities, and as I get older I'm noticing them more? But from people I talk to, people seem to be suffering a lot more with stress, chronic stress especially, than they were, say, 3 or 5 years ago. I do think there are a lot of issues in society that need to be addressed, but that's not why we're here today. So when we look at inflammation, and sometimes I feel I sound like a broken record saying it to my clients, especially when we start looking at results. So if the scale, say, doesn't move 1 week, but their nutrition has been awesome, their movement, their water, everything has been awesome, but the scales doesn't move, then usually I will have them reflect on the week or even the previous 24 hours. How did you sleep? Have you had a lot of bowel movements? If, and this is not unusual, if someone hasn't had a bowel movement in 5 or 7 days, then you can expect there's going to be a toxic overload there, because you have all this waste just building up in the colon and the intestines, and it starts to leach, it starts to seep back into the body, back into the bloodstream. And of course, these toxins, they're like foreign invaders to the body, and they are going to cause an immune response. They can even cause a histamine response in some people. They will cause rushing of white blood cells and fluid to certain areas of the body, and we can see a lot of inflammation here, and that's not unusual. Again, that's that toxic seepage going back into the body, and something like that really concerns me, especially people that chronic constipation is a big issue. Chronic constipation and chronic inflammation go hand in hand, and that really is a big concern of mine, because I worry about outcomes later on down the line from constantly having this toxic overload in the body. Anyway, so when we look at people's results, or they might be weighing in, or we're looking at biomarkers or whatever, and we see that maybe there is some inflammation there. Maybe someone hurt their knee. So let's say you were playing basketball and you fell and smashed your knee. Of course, you're going to have a lot of inflammation there, because you're going to have the white blood cells rush into the area. Inflammation is an immune response. It wants to encapsulate that area that has been hurt with a lot of white blood cells, a lot of water. We're increasing the temperature of that area to make sure that we can help the body in that location heal and regenerate, do what it needs to do, while at the same time keeping foreign invaders and pathogens out of the area. So we get a lot of blood flow to an injury or a damaged area like that. We get some blood coagulation happening there. If you fell and smashed your knee and maybe you got a big gash, of course you're going to see that blood flow to the area and a scab forming to protect and keep bacteria and pathogens out of the area there. But you will get a lot of inflammation, and depending on how severe that fall was, you may have got a huge increase in cortisol. So there may be like a whole huge response throughout the body, which could cause increased inflammation everywhere, not just in the knee. Then if someone had a super awesome week and nutrition and everything is great and sleep was great, except they've had a tummy bug or a flu or a cold, of course there's going to be inflammation there, because your body is fighting off that pathogen. And when the body fights off pathogens, it can call in a lot of fluid to help flush out and help flush the lymphatic system, help flush out the bug. We'll also see that capillaries can swell to allow extra flow of water and toxins in and out in both directions. So there's a lot going on there. And we can retain up to 6 pounds of fluid a day. Like, that's quite a lot. So if you're sick and you stand on the scales and you're like, oh my God, I've been vomiting all week, I don't know why I'm not down, there could be that big inflammation, water retention component of it. And it's really not unusual. It's actually quite common in people. Let's say someone wants to weigh on a Saturday morning and they've had a terrible sleep on a Friday night. Let's say kids woke them up all night, nightmares or whatever it may have been. They wake up, their head is banging, their face is warm, they've got a temperature, they can feel soreness all over, they just don't feel themselves, but they had an awesome week just that one night. For some people, depending on the person and how sensitive they are, that one night, let's say they had weighed on the Friday morning, and I'll just pick a random number, and they're 140 pounds. So 140 pounds on the Friday morning, they get that one bad sleep on the Friday night, even though nutrition and everything was awesome, they can wake up and be 142 or 143 pounds on the Saturday morning. We know there's no way they gained body fat. We know that their nutrition and everything was dialed in perfectly, water was great, it was just that sleep. that person, of course, can get very disheartened, but we understand, hey, it's okay, it's not body fat, this is what's going on. So there's a lot of considerations to be taken in. We know we can hold a lot of fluid, and that but that again is very individual dependent. A bigger person can retain a lot more fluid, a smaller person can retain a little bit, but regardless, we all do retain fluid. The body can be made up of 70 to 80% water. So you look at UFC fighters or boxers before a fight, they'll do their weigh-in and they'll dehydrate themselves for 48 to 72 hours before their weigh-in. They will be down, they'll hit their weight, but then they'll hydrate again before their fight, or they'll even super hydrate, and they can put on pounds before that fight begins. Speaking of water retention. So inflammation and fluid retention and swelling, all of that can very much go hand in hand, and it will have an impact. So that's why we like to use a combination of measurements. We like to use pictures, we like to use the scales, we like to use measurements, we like to use blood panels, we like to use just your clothes. We use everything, and we work with everything as a system to see what might be going on and optimize results and long-term results. So inflammation, even though I say it a lot, and I do say it to my clients a lot, and I can recognize it, and a lot of my clients can recognize it in themselves now, it's very common. It is a very common thing, especially in this day and age. So as much as we talk about stress in this day and age, we have to talk about inflammation, because they go hand in hand, pretty much like brother and sister. So we can't disregard the big impact that inflammation can have on our results. Sometimes on a client weigh-in post, sometimes I can almost see like every second person is inflammation, and I can get 100 and 150 comments on there, and every second person will have some sort of inflammation, whether or not it's constipation, it's sleep, it's a flu, sore throat, periods. The menstrual cycle is always going to play a part in that. Maybe they ate out last night and there was a lot of trans fats or hydrogenated fats, because they're very inflammatory. So even if someone makes a really good choice and they choose, say, chicken wings, salt and pepper chicken wings, but they wake up the next morning and they're like super inflamed, they're like, I don't know what I did wrong, my week was great, I even made a good choice when I was out last night. Chances are, if you're waking up inflamed, there was some toxins in that food, and most of the time it's going to be toxin oils can be the main drivers behind inflammation when it comes to food, if someone is avoiding grains or anything else like that. So there really is a lot of considerations, and I know it can be disheartening when you, let's say, weigh, or you try on a pair of trousers, they were loose last week but they're a bit tight this week, but I've done everything great. So there is a lot. There was a client of mine the other day, and she said, how is this possible? I'm up 3.5 pounds, like I did the exact same as I did last week. So I asked her a series of questions to try narrow down what's going on, and she tells me, oh, but I had a big fall on Thursday evening and I hit my ribs off the corner of a table, and I have a big bruise and swelling, and it's painful. And I'm like, well, that's going to be a big contributor to your results on the scales, especially if there's bruising. We know that's internal bleeding, so there's going to be a lot of blood flow rushing to that area. There's going to be a lot of fluid, there's going to be a lot of white blood cells in there trying to help you heal. So that, of course, and especially depending on how hard you would fall on the corner of a coffee table, that can be quite a shock to the body, and that can affect the central nervous system too. So although a number can be disheartening, you have to sit and take a minute and reflect. How did I sleep? Were my bowel movements good? Was my water good? Was my salt good? Was my nutrition on point? Did I have carbs last night that may be causing me to retain fluid? Because we know that carbs can act like a sponge in your gut So there's a lot of questions. So when we look at inflammation, we have to consider everything, and then we line that up to the results we're seeing, and then we might go, oh, okay, all right, now I understand. I'm not going to let this deter me. I'm not going to let this dishearten me. Continue on my journey and hopefully see an improvement next week, and so on and so on. So inflammation, it's definitely a big one. It's a very common one. We can have loads of drivers of inflammation. Like I said, sleep, flu, cold, histamine intolerances, toxic exposure, antibiotics, food intolerances, stress, arguments with people. It really can depend on how sensitive someone is. For someone who already has chronic stress, even watching a horror film can increase stress and drive up inflammation even more. So there's really a lot, and you have to, like I said, my best advice there is, if you're seeing that the results are not what you expected after having an awesome week or putting in 110%, take the time to sit and reflect and ask yourself all the questions. What may be contributing to this? So I hope you found that helpful. Please refer to it as you need to, because with all of us, there's always going to be instances where the scales, our clothes, our results, our biomarkers may not be showing our effort or reflecting the effort we put in. So it's good to have reassuring videos like this that help you kind of understand. And please do share with anyone you feel may benefit and help us reach the masses, please. Otherwise, have a great day and stay safe. Bye.